A woman can smile at your father's funeral and still be counting the minutes until the will gets read. I didn't know that yet. Not on the day this story starts. On that day, I only knew three things. My hands smelled like marine varnish. My back ached from 12 hours, bent over a stranger's boat engine. And my wife texted me at 6:42 p.m. asking if I'd finally be home before the good light was gone for pictures. Pictures? For what? I didn't know. With Michelle, there was always a project. My name is Daniel Weir. I'm 35 years old, and I run Weir Marine Repair out of a cinderblock shop on the edge of the Ashley River, not far from the Wapoo Bridge. It's the kind of place where the paint's peeling, and the coffee's always burnt, but the engines run right when I'm done with them. That's the part that matters to me. I want to tell you about my father first, because none of this makes sense without him. My father, Arthur Weir, was 72 years old and drove a 1998 Ford Ranger with a bad muffler and a Bondo patch on the tailgate. Michelle hated that truck. To her it wasn't just old, it was an embarrassment. "Daniel, your dad called." "Twice," she said, finally looking up from her phone as I wiped grease off my knuckles. "And please tell me he isn't driving that eyesore to our neighborhood anymore. My coworkers saw him yesterday, and they literally asked me if he was a character in a sitcom." I called him back before I even took my boots off, swallowing the anger. "Danny," my father's voice came through, warm and steady. "You eat yet? Come by tomorrow. I got shrimp from Anthony at the dock, gonna do a low country boil. Bring Michelle if she wants to come." I looked at Michelle. She was already rolling her eyes, mouthing the words "no way" before I could even ask. Eating out of newspaper spread on a cramped kitchen table wasn't luxury enough for her. "I'll come, Dad. Might just be me. Suit yourselves." He didn't sound hurt. He never let it show. That was the thing about my father. He absorbed disappointment the way that old truck of his absorbed potholes. You'd never know how many hits he was taking underneath. Welcome to Dad's raw revenge. Get comfortable, and keep this in mind. The people in this story had every chance to do right. They just chose otherwise. Hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to love it here. I want you to understand something about my marriage before I go any further, because I think a lot of you are going to recognize this, and it's going to sting a little. It stung for me too, eventually. Just took me 4 years to feel it. Michelle never screamed. She never threw plates. If you'd met us at a dinner party, you'd have thought we had the easiest marriage in Charleston County. What she did instead was smaller, quieter. A comment here, a sigh there. "Your dad really won't get a new truck?" she said one night in bed, out of absolutely nowhere. "I mean, at some point it's embarrassing, Daniel. My coworkers ask about him like he's a character in a sitcom. He likes his truck. He likes being cheap." She rolled over. "There's a difference between frugal and just, refusing to live like a normal person." I remember staring at the ceiling fan going around and telling myself she just wanted more for us. That's all it was. A woman who wanted security. Who didn't want to end up like some of the women in her family, married to men who never provided. I believed that so hard I built a whole marriage on top of it. Here's the thing though, and this is where I need you to pay attention, because it matters later. My dad wasn't poor. Not even close. He just didn't believe money was for showing off. He owned that little house on B Street, free and clear. And there was a piece of land out past John's Island, waterfront, that he'd bought back in the 80s for next to nothing, when nobody wanted marsh-adjacent property that flooded twice a year. He never talked about it, never bragged. I only knew about it because I used to go fishing out there with him as a kid. Michelle didn't know about the land at all. Not yet. Spring turned into early summer that year, the kind of Charleston humidity that sits on your chest like a wet towel the second you step outside. I was working 6 days a week at the shop. Boat season means everybody suddenly remembers they own a boat, and it needs fixing yesterday. My dad, though he'd never say it, had slowed down. Little things. He'd get winded walking from the truck to the mailbox. He started declining our low country boils, saying his stomach wasn't right. Probably just old age catching up, he told me on the phone in June, laughing it off. Nothing a little bourbon won't cure. I laughed with him. I actually laughed. Because that's what you do when you can't imagine the alternative. You laugh, and you tell yourself he will get better. My father died on a Tuesday morning in late June. Heart attack, sudden, in his kitchen, coffee still brewing. The neighbor, Mr. Nathan Doss, found him when he didn't come out to get the paper. I got the call at the shop. Hands covered in grease, same as always. And I remember Caleb, my shop hand. Good kid, 24, been with me 3 years. I remember him having to physically catch the wrench I was holding, because my hand just stopped working. Everything after that call happened underwater. Sound came through muffled. People's mouths moved, but I only caught every third word. The funeral was small, the way he would have wanted it. Held at the little Baptist church off Savannah Highway where he'd gone every other Sunday for 30 years. The other Sunday schedule being a running joke between us, since he always said God understood a workingman's priorities. Neighbors brought food. Real Charleston food, none of that fancy stuff. A woman named Becky from down the street brought a pan of shrimp and grits that could have made a grown man cry on its own. And somebody's husband smoked a pork butt overnight that fed 40 people easy. My father's old truck sat in the driveway the whole week after, and nobody, not me, not anybody, could bring themselves to move it. Michelle was there. She wore black, she hugged the right people. She said he's in a better place now to enough relatives that it started sounding like a line from a script. I didn't notice at the time how empty it sounded. I was too busy drowning. You okay? She asked me that night, back at our place, the first time we'd been alone in days. No, I said honestly. I don't think I will be for a while. I know, baby, she rubbed my back. Take whatever time you need. I believed her. God help me. I believed her completely. 2 weeks passed. I went back to the shop because staying home made the silence in my own head too loud. Caleb handled me with a kind of gentle patience I didn't know a 24-year-old had in him. Took the easy jobs off my plate without making a thing of it. Brought me a sweet tea every morning without asking if I wanted one. You don't gotta be here, boss, he told me one afternoon. Nobody'd blame you for taking time. I need the noise, I told him. The quiet's worse. At home, though, there was no escaping it. Every corner of that house had my dad's fingerprints somewhere. A chair he'd fixed for us. A fishing rod he'd left in the garage just in case. I'd sit on the couch some nights just staring at nothing. The TV on, but not really on. My mind stuck somewhere between the hospital and the church, and every conversation I wished I'd had with him, and didn't. That's exactly where I was. Couch, dead air, grief sitting on my chest like humidity. When Michelle walked in from the other room and dropped something in my lap. A brochure. Glossy. The Amalfi Coast. Big bold letters. A couple on a yacht, looking like they didn't have a single problem between them. I stared at it for a second before it registered. What's this? I was thinking Italy, she said, sitting on the arm of the couch like she was announcing dinner plans. We've been through so much. We deserve something to look forward to. I actually thought I'd misheard her. I remember replaying the sentence in my head, waiting for it to make sense a different way. Michelle, my voice, came out flatter than I meant it to. My dad's been gone 3 weeks. I know that, Daniel. She said it like I was the one being unreasonable. I'm not saying tomorrow. I'm saying we should have something to plan. Something good. I can't even think about a vacation right now. She was quiet for a second. Just a second. And in that silence, something shifted in her face that I'd never seen before. Not sadness, not patience. Something colder. Grief doesn't pay for anything, Daniel, she said. I didn't understand that sentence yet. I wouldn't understand it fully for another few weeks. But I felt it land somewhere in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. And even numb as I was, even grieving as I was, some small, quiet part of me knew that sentence didn't belong to a woman who loved me. She stood up, smoothed her shirt, and walked back toward the kitchen like she hadn't said anything at all. I sat there holding a brochure for the Amalfi Coast. My father 2 weeks in the ground. And for the first time in 4 years of marriage, I felt something I couldn't name yet. I just knew it tasted like fear. What I didn't know yet was that the person sleeping next to me every night had already been doing math on my family's grief. I didn't know about the land yet. I didn't know what Thomas Vance, my dad's attorney of almost 30 years, was quietly finalizing behind closed doors that same week. All I knew sitting on that couch with a glossy brochure in my hands and my father's absence pressing down on the whole house like the Charleston heat outside, was this. The woman I married was not who I thought she was, and she had absolutely no idea what my father had already done to protect me from her. She started spending his money 3 weeks before she even knew how much there was. That's the part that still gets me, looking back. Michelle didn't wait for a number. She didn't wait for a lawyer, a ledger, a single confirmed fact. She just decided there was a fortune sitting somewhere with my name on it, and she started building her new life on credit before anybody told her the terms. I didn't know any of that yet, though, not that week. That week, I was still trying to figure out how to breathe right. July in Charleston does something to a house. The air conditioning runs constant, and you can hear it click on and off like a heartbeat in the walls. I notice things like that now. Small sounds, small silences, because my mind had nowhere else productive to go. Grief does that. It turns you into somebody who notices everything and processes nothing. I was back at the shop most days. Caleb had taken to running interference for me without ever making it obvious, fielding calls from customers who wanted to vent about their engines, steering the easy jobs my way and the complicated ones to himself. You know you don't have to prove anything right now, he told me one afternoon, elbow deep in somebody's outboard motor. Boats'll still be broken next week. Working's easier than sitting still, I said. Sitting still, my head goes places I don't want it to go. Truer than I even meant it. Because at home, my head had started going somewhere I really didn't want it to go, straight to my wife. And a math problem she seemed to be solving without me. It started small. A new dress in the closet I didn't remember her buying. A comment about how some people around here don't know what they're sitting on. Then, about 10 days after the brochure incident, it stopped being small. I came home from the shop, grease under my nails, same as always, and found her at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a legal pad next to it covered in her handwriting. Numbers. Circled numbers. What's all this? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. I've been doing some research. She didn't even look up right away. Did you know Johns Island rezoning is happening this year? Waterfront parcels out there are about to be worth triple what they were. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. How do you know about the land? Now she looked up, and there was something in her face. Not embarrassment, not guilt. Satisfaction, like she'd caught a fish she'd been patiently baiting for weeks. Your dad's neighbor mentioned it at the funeral, she said. Said Arthur always talked about the property like it was some big secret. I did a little digging after an official-looking packet from a commercial developer showed up in your dad's mail last week, she said, tapping the legal pad. Daniel, a hospitality group, offered him a massive buyout because of the upcoming Johns Island commercial rezoning. Once that goes through in October, that useless marshland is easily worth $2, maybe $3 million. I sat down slowly across from her, because my legs didn't feel like they wanted to hold me up standing. Michelle, I don't even know what my dad's estate looks like yet. Thomas hasn't called us in for anything. Well, he needs to. She closed the laptop with a decisive little snap. Because I've been thinking. We should get a new car. That old Camry is embarrassing, and I don't want to keep driving something with 110,000 miles on it when we're about to come into real money. Real money. Like my father was a lottery ticket she'd been holding on to, waiting to cash. He's been gone for 3 weeks, I said quietly. I'm aware of how long he's been gone, Daniel. Her voice sharpened. I'm also aware that life keeps going. I want an SUV. The Lexus, the RX. Fully loaded, and I've been looking at contractors for the kitchen. That Formica countertop has to go. It's humiliating when people come over. I just stared at her. 3 weeks. My father's truck was still sitting in his driveway, because nobody could bring themselves to move it, and she was thinking of her next car, Daniel. Think about it, she said softly, stepping closer and putting a hand on my chest. It felt practiced. Your dad lived like a pauper, but he did it so we wouldn't have to. Don't you think he wants us to actually enjoy life? We need to call Thomas Vance and execute the estate immediately. It's what Arthur would want for us. She was using his memory as a crowbar to pry open his wallet. I can't do this right now, I said, pulling away from her. You can't do what? Have a conversation about our future? Our future can wait until I've buried my dad's memory with some dignity. Michelle. My voice cracked in a way I hated. I'm not doing kitchen countertops right now. I'm not doing Alexis. I need you to just give me room. She didn't say anything else that night. But I noticed she didn't close the legal pad either. She just moved it to the counter, in plain sight, like a reminder she wanted sitting there when I walked past it every morning. If you've ever watched someone you love turn into a stranger in slow motion, you know exactly how the next 2 weeks felt for me. Thomas Vance called the house at the end of July. He mentioned there were several unique components to my father's assets. Michelle was listening on the speakerphone, practically glowing. To her, unique components was lawyer speak for a massive jackpot. She smiled at nothing, completely convinced she had won. August hit differently that year. Charleston in August is a special kind of misery, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer and makes everybody a little meaner than they mean to be. It was a Thursday night. I remember because Thursday was trash night, and I was hauling the cans out to the curb when Michelle came out onto the porch holding a folder. "We need to talk," she said. Those words that have never once in the history of marriage preceded anything good. I set the trash can down and walked up the steps. She held the folder out to me. Inside was a printout, a listing for a house in a gated community over on Daniel Island, easily a $2 million property, with her handwriting scrawled in the margins. Perfect for us. Pool, dock, 5-bed. "Michelle, what is this?" "I found our house," she said, like she was announcing good news. "I know it seems fast, but the market moves quick, and once your dad's estate clears, we'll want to move fast too. We are not buying a $2 million house. Why not?" Her voice climbed half an octave. "You're about to inherit millions, Daniel. Millions. I looked it up myself. The rezoning goes through in October, and that land your dad had out on John's Island is going to be worth a fortune. I don't understand why you're acting like we're broke." "Because I don't know what I'm inheriting." My own voice came out louder than I meant it to, echoing off the porch ceiling. "Thomas hasn't told us anything specific. You're planning our entire life around a number you made up in your head." "I didn't make it up." She crossed her arms. "I did research. I know what that land is worth. And frankly, Daniel, I think it's time you start acting like a man whose wife deserves a life, instead of some grease monkey who's content living paycheck to paycheck out of loyalty to his cheap dead father." The words hit me like a slap. A real one. My ears actually rang. "Don't," I said, low and shaking. "Don't you ever talk about my father like that again." "Why?" "Because it's true?" She stepped closer, and her voice dropped into something colder than I'd ever heard from her. "Your dad held you back your whole life, Daniel. 40 years in that same tiny house. That truck. He could have given you a real start, and instead he let you scrape by fixing rich people's boats while sitting on millions of dollars he never touched. And now that he's finally dead and there's actual money on the table, you want to sit here and act like spending it is some kind of sin?" I couldn't speak. My jaw was locked so tight it ached. I loved him. I finally managed. I don't care what he had or didn't have. I loved him for who he was. "Well, I didn't marry your father," Michelle snapped. "I married you, and I am done. Done, living like this, while there's a fortune sitting in some lawyer's file cabinet with your name on it." This was it. This was the moment I would replay 100 times over the following weeks, trying to find the version of myself that saw it coming sooner. "So, what exactly do you want from me, Michelle?" I asked quietly. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said the sentence that changed everything. "If you won't share it and give me the life I deserve, I'll divorce you and take half of it anyway." Silence. Real silence. The kind where you can hear your own blood in your ears. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car passed. Normal sounds from a world that hadn't just ended for me. "You'd divorce me," I said slowly, "over money you don't even know exists yet." "I'd divorce you," she said, "because apparently that's the only way you'll take me seriously." She turned and walked back inside, letting the screen door slap shut behind her, leaving me standing on the porch in the August heat with a trash can at my feet, and a marriage that had just quietly died right in front of me. I didn't cry. I want you to know that. I thought I would. I thought that sentence would break something open in me and I'd fall apart right there on the porch steps. Instead, something went still. Something went cold and clear, like a fever finally breaking. I'd spent 4 years defending her to everyone who questioned her, including myself. And in one sentence, on one hot Thursday night, she told me exactly who she'd been the whole time. I want to tell you what I did next, because I think it's the part that surprised even me. I walked back into the house. I didn't fight. I didn't scream back. I didn't call a lawyer of my own, or start hiding assets or plotting some kind of counterattack. I went inside, got a glass of water, and sat down across from her at the kitchen table and looked her dead in the eye. "If you want a divorce, Michelle, file the papers," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "But I am not touching my dad's memory right now to satisfy your greed. Do what you have to do." She looked surprised. "What?" Michelle stared at me, completely caught off guard. She expected tears. She expected a shouting match. She expected me to beg her to stay. "I'm not going to fight you," I repeated. "You want out? You want the money? You want whatever life you think is waiting on the other side of my father's death? Fine, take it. I don't have the strength to fight you and grieve him at the same time, and I'm not going to turn what's left of him into a courtroom circus." I meant every word. I was so tired, so hollowed out by grief, that the idea of a legal war felt like more weight than I could carry. I thought giving up was the only piece I had left to protect. Michelle stared at me for a long moment, and something crossed her face I didn't expect. Not relief, not triumph, exactly. Something more like confusion, suspicion. You're just going to let me walk?" she asked slowly. "I'm letting you do whatever you think is best for you," I said, and walked into the bedroom. She narrowed her eyes at me, like I'd said something in a language she didn't speak. And that right there, that look, was the first sign I had that giving up quietly might do something to her that fighting back never could. Over the next 2 weeks, Michelle changed again, but not in a way I expected. She got quiet, watchful. I'd catch her staring at me across a room like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She started asking strange questions. Did I talk to a lawyer? Did I make any calls? Was I hiding something from her? "I'm not hiding anything," I told her honestly, more than once. "I told you. I'm not fighting this." But she didn't believe me. And here's the thing about a woman like Michelle, a woman who'd spent a month doing math on a fortune she'd never even seen a number for. Silence from the other side doesn't read as peace. It reads as strategy. She thought I was up to something. She couldn't imagine a version of me that simply didn't want to fight. So in her mind, my calm had to be a trap. That paranoia sent her running, not toward caution, but toward the most aggressive divorce attorney in Charleston County, a man named Paul Hopper, who apparently had a reputation for going for blood in high-asset settlements. She didn't tell me she'd hired him. I found out from a certified letter that showed up at the shop, addressed to me informing me that Michelle Weir was filing for divorce, and that all future communication should go through counsel. Caleb was the one who handed it to me. He watched my face as I read it. "Boss?" he said carefully. "You all right?" "Yeah," I said, and I meant it, in a strange, quiet way that surprised me. "Yeah, I think I actually am." What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was what Michelle was doing behind the scenes during those same weeks. She'd already maxed out our joint emergency cards to put a non-refundable deposit on that Daniel Island house, banking on the inheritance to cover it. She bought a massive luxury wardrobe on credit, and she completely drained our business operating account to hand Paul Hopper a heavy 5-figure retainer fee. She gambled every single cent we actually owned on a promise she made to herself. She assured him I was sitting on millions, and Hopper took the case eagerly, fully expecting to petition the court to make me cover all of her astronomical legal bills once the land value was uncovered. She was building an entire future on a number nobody had confirmed, spending money she didn't have, on a promise nobody had made her. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button while you're at it, and be sure you're subscribed. Thomas Vance, meanwhile, had gone quiet. No calls, no updates, nothing beyond a short letter confirming that estate matters would be addressed at the appropriate time, in the appropriate setting. I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just how these things worked, slow, bureaucratic, indifferent to the emotional wreckage happening in the houses of the people waiting on them. I had no idea my father had been 3 steps ahead of all of us since long before he ever got sick. The settlement meeting got scheduled for the 2nd week of September. Michelle's lawyer's office, a sleek glass building downtown near the harbor. The kind of place with a lobby that smells like money and ambition. Michelle called me the night before, her voice tight with something that almost sounded like nerves. "Tomorrow's the day," she said. "I hope you're ready to be reasonable." "I told you," I said. "I'm not fighting you, Michelle." "Good," she said. "Because I already know what I want." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared of what she wanted. I'd made my peace with letting it go weeks ago. I lay awake because some part of me, some quiet, patient part I didn't fully understand yet, kept thinking about the look on Thomas Vance's face in that first meeting. The look he gave me right before we left his office. Like he knew something I didn't. Like my father had left something behind that none of us, not me, not Michelle, not even her expensive lawyer with his contingency fee dreams, were prepared for. The next morning I put on the same button-down shirt I'd worn to my father's funeral. I didn't bring a lawyer. I didn't bring a single document. I walked into that glass building on the harbor with nothing but an empty folder tucked under my arm, and I took the elevator up to the 14th floor, where Michelle was already waiting, wearing a brand new designer dress and a smile that told me she believed, completely, that she'd already won. She had no idea what was waiting behind that conference room door. And neither really did I. A grease monkey with an empty folder just watched a $2 million dream die in real time. That's not me bragging. I want to be clear about that before I tell you what happened in that room. I walked in broken, grieving, and ready to lose everything without a fight. Losing my father meant I had lost everything already. The conference room on the 14th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Charleston Harbor. The kind of view that costs extra just to sit near. Michelle was already seated when I walked in, flanked by Paul Hopper, a tall man in an expensive suit, with the kind of tan that comes from a membership, not a job. Michelle looked like a woman headed to her own coronation. "Daniel." Paul Hopper stood and extended a hand like we were old friends closing a business deal. "Glad we could finally sit down and get this resolved." I shook his hand once, briefly, and sat down across from them. Empty folder in front of me. Nothing in it but a blank legal pad I hadn't written a single word on. "Where's your attorney?" Michelle asked, glancing at the door like she expected someone to walk in behind me. "Didn't bring one," I said. She and Paul Hopper exchanged a look I recognized instantly, even numb as I still was. It was the look of two people who thought they'd just won something before the game had even started. "All right then," Paul said, settling back into his chair. A folder opened in front of him, thick with papers. "Let's not waste anyone's time. My client is prepared to discuss an equitable division of marital assets, which, given the size of the estate in question, we anticipate." "I'm not fighting it," I said quietly. He paused. "I'm sorry?" "Whatever she wants. The land, the house, whatever's in that estate, I'm not going to fight her for it." My voice came out flat, tired, exactly the way I felt. "I just want this over with." I meant it. Every word. 4 months of grief had hollowed me out so completely that the idea of fighting for money felt obscene, like haggling over the price of a coffin. Michelle's face lit up like Christmas morning. She reached over and squeezed Paul Hopper's forearm, an actual physical gesture of triumph, like she couldn't help herself. Paul allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The kind of smile a man gives when he can already see his percentage cleared in his bank account. "Well," Paul said, straightening his tie, "that certainly simplifies things. If we could just get a formal accounting of the estate assets from the executor, we can move to finalize." That's when the side door opened. Thomas Vance walked in wearing the same gray suit he'd worn to every meeting I'd ever had with him, carrying a slim leather folder under one arm. He nodded politely to the room, took a seat at the head of the table, and set his glasses on the bridge of his nose with the unhurried calm of a man who had done this exact thing 1,000 times before, and knew precisely how it was going to go. "Thank you for joining us," Paul Hopper said, sitting up straighter. "We'll need a full accounting of the estate assets, specifically the Johns Island waterfront property and any liquid holdings, for the purposes of this settlement." "Of course," Thomas said. He opened the folder, glanced down at a single page, and looked back up at the room over the top of his glasses. "Though I should clarify something first, for the sake of accuracy. Something in his voice made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I didn't know what was coming, but I knew, the way you know a storm is close before you see the clouds, that something was about to change in that room. There is nothing to divide, Thomas Vance said. Silence. Michelle blinked. I'm sorry, what? There is nothing to divide, he repeated, calm as still water. Arthur Weir did not leave any property or funds directly to his son Daniel. Approximately 6 years ago, Arthur placed all of his assets, the Johns Island property included, into an independent testamentary trust, managed entirely by our firm, on behalf of a beneficiary structure that does not include direct ownership by Daniel Weir. He looked at Michelle, not unkindly, but without an ounce of apology either. Legally speaking, Mr. Weir owns 0% of these assets. They are held in trust, entirely shielded from claims against his personal estate, including, I'm afraid, marital dissolution proceedings. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second, the way I had to sit with it in real time. 0%. My father, quiet, boiled peanut eating, 40 years in the same house Arthur Weir, had legally made it so that nothing he owned could ever be touched by anyone who came at me sideways. Not even me, technically, especially not anyone chasing it through a courtroom. Paul Hopper's face went through about 4 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that looked a lot like panic. He cleared his throat. That's not possible. My client did extensive research on the rezoning valuation of that property. We structured an entire. I understand, the property has significant projected value, Thomas said evenly. That value, however, belongs to the trust. Not to Mr. Weir, not to his marital estate. The trust has its own designated administrator and its own beneficiaries, none of which include claims arising from a divorce. Who are the beneficiaries? Michelle's voice had gone thin, brittle, like ice about to crack. Thomas Vance looked at her for a long moment. That's not something I'm at liberty to disclose in this setting, Mrs. Weir, but I can tell you, it is not you. I watched my wife's face fall apart in slow motion. Every carefully applied piece of makeup, every ounce of confidence she'd walked in wearing like armor, it all just started sliding off her at once. She turned to Paul Hopper. Fix this. Do something. Mrs. Weir, Paul said carefully, and I could hear the shift in his voice already. The sound of a man doing math on his own losses. If the assets are held in an irrevocable trust structured prior to the marriages, this changes the entire. He stopped. Started again. I'll need to review the trust documents personally, but if what Mr. Vance is describing holds up, there may not be significant marital assets to pursue here at all. There has to be something, Michelle said, and her voice cracked right down the middle. The house. The truck. Something, the house on B Street and the vehicle are both part of the same trust structure, Thomas said, as is nearly everything else your father-in-law owned at the time of his passing. I sat there quietly through all of it, and I want to be honest with you. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. I mostly just felt my father's presence in that room, like he'd somehow found a way to reach through 6 years and 1 funeral and put his hand on my shoulder one more time. Paul Hopper closed his folder slowly, the papers inside it suddenly worth nothing at all. I watched him do the math in real time, the contingency fee he'd been counting on. The percentage of millions that had just evaporated into a legal structure none of his research had accounted for. Mrs. Weir, he said quietly, I think we need to speak privately. No. Michelle's voice climbed sharp and desperate. No, there has to be a number. There has to be. Daniel, tell them. Tell them about the land. Tell them what you told me. I never told you anything, Michelle. My voice came out steady. Steadier than I expected. You did the research yourself. You made the plans yourself. You threatened to divorce me over money that was never mine to give you. And there it was. The moment I finally understood the full shape of what my father had done. He hadn't just protected his land. He'd protected me. From a version of my own marriage I'd been too in love to see clearly. He built a wall around everything he owned years before he ever got sick, because somewhere along the way, quietly, without ever saying a word to me, He'd figured out exactly who Michelle really was. Thomas Vance closed his folder and stood. "I believe my part in this meeting is concluded," he said. He turned to me, and something in his face softened. Just slightly. The first crack of real emotion I'd seen from him in 6 years of knowing him. "Daniel, before I go." He reached into the leather folder and pulled out a plain white envelope, sealed. My name written across the front in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere in the world. Blocky, careful, a little slanted to the left. My father's handwriting. "Your father told me to give you this," Thomas said quietly, "when this day came." My hands were shaking when I took it. Not from fear, from something closer to awe. He knew. Somehow, years ago, he knew this exact day was coming, and he'd already written the words he wanted me to read on it. I set the envelope down in front of me without opening it. Not yet. Not in that room. Behind me, the meeting was dissolving into chaos. Paul Hopper was already gathering his things, muttering something to Michelle about reassessing representation, which I understood, even in my numbed state, to mean he wanted nothing more to do with a client who couldn't pay him what he'd been promised. Michelle sat frozen, staring at the table, her cream-colored dress suddenly looking less like a coronation gown and more like a costume for a party that had been cancelled. "This isn't over," she said, to no one in particular. "This isn't over." I stood up, tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket, and walked out of that room without saying another word. I had only made it about half a block down the sidewalk toward my truck when I heard her heels behind me, fast and uneven on the pavement. "Daniel." Michelle's voice cracked through the afternoon air. "Daniel, wait." I stopped, but I didn't turn around right away. When I finally did, she was standing there, mascara starting to streak, designer dress suddenly looking too big for her, somehow. "You planned this," she said, breathing hard. "You and your cheap father, you planned this whole thing to humiliate me." "Nobody planned anything to humiliate you, Michelle," I said quietly. "My dad protected what was his. That's all that ever happened here." "You knew," she said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You had to have known. You let me plan a whole life around money that was never even there." "I didn't know," I said, "and it was the truth. I found out the same time you did. Difference is, I never once threatened to leave you over it." That seemed to land somewhere, because her face crumpled, and the anger dissolved into something closer to real tears. "We had 4 years, Daniel," she said, voice breaking. "Doesn't that mean anything to you? Are you really going to just walk away from everything we built?" I looked at her for a long moment. Really looked, and I realized, with a strange kind of calm, that I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel much of anything toward her at all. Just a quiet, tired kind of finality. "We didn't build anything, Michelle," I said. "You were waiting for something to cash in. I just didn't want to see it." I didn't wait for her response. I walked away, leaving her standing on the hot pavement, and found a quiet stone bench near the harbor walk. Sat down, and let the traffic noise and the gulls and the smell of pluff mud drift over me the way they had my whole life in this city. Behind me, I heard her heels on the pavement again, this time walking away. Fast, furious, alone. I didn't watch her go. I didn't need to. I pulled the envelope out of my jacket pocket with hands that had finally stopped shaking. My father's handwriting stared back at me from the front. Just my name, Danny, the only person left alive who still called me that. I opened it carefully, like it might disappear if I moved too fast. "Son, if you are reading this, it means I am gone. And your wife has done exactly what I feared she would do. I saw how she looked at my things, and how she treated you like a paycheck. I didn't say anything because you loved her so much, and I didn't want to break your heart while I was alive. I chose to protect you this way instead. Take care of yourself, son. I'm always looking out for you." I read it twice. Then a third time. The harbor traffic kept moving around me, oblivious. The way the world always keeps moving, no matter how much of yours has just quietly ended and begun again in the same afternoon. My father never said a bad word about Michelle to my face. Not once, in 4 years. He let me love who I loved, and he protected me anyway. Silently, patiently, the way he did everything, without asking for credit. Without needing me to know, until the exact moment I needed to know it. That's the kind of man he was. Tears finally came, Right there on that bench, streaming down and hitting the paper in small dark spots. I didn't wipe them away. I didn't look in the direction Michelle had stormed off in. I just pressed the letter against my chest, closed my eyes, and let the grief and the relief and the love all move through me at once, tangled together in a way I don't think I'll ever fully untangle. "I miss you so much, Dad," I whispered, to the harbor, to the gulls, to nobody and everybody at once. Then I stood up, folded the letter carefully, and put it back in my pocket, close to my chest, right where it belonged. I walked back to my truck alone. Not broken, not triumphant, exactly, just finally, quietly, at peace. Walking toward a future my father had built for me long before I ever knew I'd need it, and leaving behind a woman who'd spent 4 years waiting for a fortune that was never, not for one single day, going to be hers. Here's the part where most people expect me to gloat. I didn't. I couldn't. Grief doesn't leave room for gloating. But karma, it turns out, doesn't need an audience to do its job. Michelle showed up with a court-appointed attorney, because Paul Hopper had already dropped her. My lawyer laid out the bank statements seamlessly. Because she had drained my business operating account and maxed our joint cards on luxury clothes and an aggressive lawyer in contemplation of a divorce, the judge didn't pull any punches. He ruled it a malicious dissipation of marital assets. The court ordered her to pay back every single cent she took from my shop, and legally assigned 100% of that accumulated debt solely to her name. The aftermath came fast after that. Last I heard, she's working double shifts at a mid-tier real estate office just to keep up with the interest payments on a mountain of debt. The high society co-workers she was so desperate to impress found out she was completely broke, and the luxury lifestyle she tanked her marriage for evaporated before it ever began. Nobody returns her calls anymore. I drove back to the shop with the windows down, the salt air pouring in. I still run Weir Marine Repair. I still get grease under my nails every day. He didn't leave me a fortune, he left me free. And honestly, that is worth a whole lot more. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.